How do sports impact inequality on a global community? Sports. Well, sports have been around for centuries. They have brought people together and communities together, and overall, they brought the people enjoyment. And however, there are many issues relevant in sports till this day. These issues consist of silenced voices, sexism, and racism. Now, silenced voices, sports give people a huge reputation in society, making athletes very popular and well known by social media and people in general. In doing so, they must be wary of what they say. In person, online, during interviews, they have to be careful about stuff they say because it can lead to angry fans, hate towards them, being canceled by cancel culture. Now, cancel culture is basically where a group of people online send mass amounts of hate towards a certain individual, and people start to catch on and doing the same thing. It's like a bandwagon where a bunch of people do the same thing to send a lot of hate towards one individual. Now, this can be detrimental to an athlete's reputation as it will destroy their career and how people see them. An example of an athlete that had to use a different method other than speaking out on a certain matter was Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick is a NFL football player, and he used an action rather than his words to demonstrate his message. Now, if he used his words to speak out on the matter that he wanted to send his message on, it would have been more detrimental to his career as he would have received a lot more hate than he had just kneeling during the national anthem. Now, this reduced a lot of backlash, as if he used his words, it would have been more detrimental. Now, sexism. Sports still have sexism and is still very relevant to this day. Men have many more advantages over women and are treated better in sports. Examples of this is higher pay, more reputation, more brand deals, and more opportunities. Now, men, they receive uh, more pay because they are televised more and represented more by media and interviews and different ways of getting their name out there. Now, the WNBA, for example, is the Women's National Basketball Association. They receive much less attention than the men's team by fans and broadcasters, which means they make a lot less revenue than the men's team. Now, racism. Racism has been around in sports dating back to the Olympics in the 1900s. Racism has been seen in sports such as the way people start off their career. Now, the poverty population is made up mostly by African Americans, and sports teams when they're choosing athletes, they tend to go for those athletes with a more wealthy and well-known background than those of a poorer background. This gives overall an unequal chance to those with a less wealthy background, making an unequal effect and unfair for those that were not as privileged to have higher reputation or a higher chance in starting off their career in sports. Now, in conclusion, sports have an impact on inequality with silenced voices, racism, and sexism. These problems must be addressed and resolved for a better functioning society where equality is prevalent. And that is it. Do you have any questions?
I do have two questions for you. Question number one. How did your research question evolve as you moved through the whole process?
At first, my research question was very vague. It was just how sports have represent some sort of. It just started off with sexism, I believe, and then it later on developed to overall how it represents inequality in different sorts of aspects.
All right. And what advice would you have for researchers that consider this topic in the future?
To really go into depth with the different parts of the world rather than focusing on the U.S. because um, there are more important matters out there that can show problems in sports that show inequality rather than just in the United States.
All right.